Welcome to the True Life Balance Podcast. My name is Brad Lancaster.
And my name is Tiffany Lancaster. And this is a podcast about relationships and deep connection.
And this is a podcast about health and fitness.
And this is a podcast about consciousness and purpose.
And this is a podcast about business, sales, marketing, entrepreneurship. In other words, this is a podcast about everything that we care about. So come along for the ride and hope you enjoy.
Well, we've been looking forward to this. I started telling you guys are like an inspiration for me. Craig, when I found out you had a podcast, we were talking at the gym and I had seen something online. I can't remember who I had seen was on your podcast. And I was like, holy cow, they have a podcast. And then I looked it up and you've got like 300 plus episodes.
Almost.
So 200 and
292 comes out
292.
on Monday. Yeah.
And you do it once a week. You record once a week, twice a week now.
Yeah,
twice
2 episodes a week.
2 episodes a week. The podcast is the Energy is Love podcast. And get it right. I'll probably say it more than once. Make sure to follow. And even if you're just following it on social media, you guys do such a great job of getting great clips out. And so even if you're not able to listen to whole podcast episodes, following you guys on social media is a fun follow too. I love that. So, but you guys inspired us because we had been talking about doing a podcast for more than 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Maybe 3 years or so. In a general theme, similar to the theme that you guys follow of, well, we'll talk about the themes in a little bit because I want to hear what you guys call your theme, not my interpretation of it.
Your Instagram is Energy is Love Podcast too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's at the Energy is Love podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right.
It was always a nightmare trying to get all the different social medias to have the same, and then it was like, whatever. So
just get the one
for whatever reason,
can.
I think Energy is Love podcast didn't work or was taken. It wasn't taken. It's not like somebody's got another podcast called Energy is Love, but for whatever reason.
It is funny how that happens though. Like right. I had to change my name to at the Brad Lancaster or whatever.
The one and only.
The one and only. The
You
only.
got that.
So, well, let's start from the beginning. So excited to have you guys here. And I wanted to dive into your guys' story. We spent time on our last podcast telling our story and listened to it. And I was like, man, we talked all the time. You guys kept asking us questions. So I thought this is going to be so great to get to hear your story because when somebody brings energy into a room that you feel comfortable enough just opening up with, you think, oh, wow, I really know them. And then you get done and you're like, oh, I just opened up to them. And so it's your guys' turn. So tell us
How you met.
the Craig and Steph origin story.
I'm
Let's
curious
start
to know
from the
how you
beginning.
guys met.
Yeah.
Go for it, babe.
Go for it?
Yeah.
First of all, it was really nice getting to know you guys. So
Thank you so much.
I was really excited. It was a really fun time.
It was an amazing time.
Amazing.
Like it was so
Transformative.
inspiring, beautiful, like there's so much about the when you guys came on the podcast, the whole experience was kind of one of those beautiful synchronistic experiences. I'm going to ramble for a minute. I tend to go on beautiful rants.
You do that while I take off my nosemakers. Sorry about that.
I think that's one of the reasons we get along so well, Craig, because I do the same thing. And so I love to hear rants.
In 2022, we shifted up our focus with the podcast and really just decided to go all in with it. And part of that was trying to find the type of people that we wanted to gravitate towards and that we wanted to bring on the show. And it's hard. It's hard to find guests. That's one thing you guys will learn as you continue to go. It's like, oh my goodness, trying to find not just quality people, but like the type of people that you want to share with your listeners and with the world and stuff like that.
That chemistry, carry that conversation, just like really be able to.
Well, something else I noticed, like the fact that we were in person was such a different energy than doing something via Zoom, which is still great, but doing something in person was so powerful. Like the energy is real that happens in that.
Yeah, that's what we prefer, obviously, right? We've done and we continue to do some Zoom interviews, and they're great, and we can really have powerful episodes that way too. But you can't beat this.
In person.
And you guys just showed up in the most beautiful way. that was helped us, inspired us, gave us. I went back and edited everything and created all the content, and I was just like blown away going back through all of it again, at all of the like beautiful, like so much minutia of amazingness came from that episode.
I had to like make myself stop. There was so much good content, so much good reels. I had to physically make myself stop. I was just going to keep pulling clips. It was so good.
I've enjoyed seeing them. So
thank you so much. You guys were gracious and
Yeah.
really loved the way that you showed up. So yeah, hopefully we'll bring the same equipment.
We're going to try.
Where did we meet, baby?
Where did we meet? It was on a starry night, St. Clair. We used to work together. And so we met. Craig was a police officer, and I was a 911 dispatcher. And so...
And this was in Tooele,
This was in Tooele, yeah. So I worked for the county. He worked for the city. And that's just where the magic began. Came in and met me, and
Awesome.
And what year was this? How long ago was it?
Oh my goodness.
We met in 2011.
It was 11.
2011.
It was 2011.
Okay.
It was both of our first years there. And we had our history, everything just like came and led us to that moment. And we actually started like official hire on dates within a couple of months of each other.
We have such a beautiful story.
I love it.
Such a beautiful, synchronistic, amazing love story. And everything was driving us towards each other.
Yeah.
And we see it now, but during that time period, it was a night. We can swear, obviously, right? You guys are an explicit podcast, right? For sure.
Yeah, we let people. It's marked as explicit. I was actually that was one of my prouder moments. Like after a couple, when you see how it's rated and it's rated as explicit, I was like, all right. Good, I succeeded.
Yeah, I'm trying to not swear as much. So
You're like, is it explicit?
I know, right? Because I was
it.
about to start dropping all the F-bombs. But we really have a beautiful story, and.
Well, you should start swearing less later.
Right. It's like our podcast is still very explicit.
No, I'm just
work
kidding.
in progress.
Yeah.
And like we looked at, going back in time and looking at it, everything was driving us together. Everything was, spinning in our lives, both separately as well as that bigger scope of things, really just getting to the moment where we connected and laid eyes on each other. And I started in...
I think it was March.
I do too. I think it was March of 2011 is when I started my career as a cop. I had already had some experience as a law enforcement officer, as a corrections officer at Salt Lake County. We talked about that on our podcast. And but that was a terrible experience in regards to just how hard of a job that was. And so I really wanted to get out on the road. And because I lived out in Tooele County, it just made more sense, right? Part of the problem was the commute in and out of Salt Lake every single day, and I just wanted to be closer. And Tooele City is the biggest, obviously, city out there in Tooele County.
And the biggest agency, right?
The biggest agency, even though it's not a big agency. I mean, at the time, I think I came on, I was like officer 30 or 31.
You were 31.
And that's like not just police officers, that's from the chief down. So there's like 31 people in the department.
That was such a surprise for me when we heard on a dispatch, and I was like, there's like 3 cops on duty. What? Like, excuse me? How does that work?
For that big of a city.
There's only 4 ambulances for the entire county. Like how, you run out of ambulances all the time. And I was like, oh, what?
Wow. Yeah. I didn't realize that. 4 cops on duty at a time.
We could go.
This is also, it's been a few years since we've been there, so it could be different.
It's not different.
It's not different.
No, I've talked to current police officers. It's not different at all.
Wow.
It's really bad.
Yeah, during the day you have admin that are on, but police officers on the road.
The times that you would need a lot of police officers in the city, right? A city of 45,000, 50,000, something at this point. And typically, in an ideal situation, there's 5. And even
How often was there 5 on duty?
Even that isn't ideal.
Yeah, 4 was we got a full crew today.
Yeah. 4 was
officers. We got a full crew.
The majority of the time you were down to 2 or 3 guys trying to manage everything. So it was really challenging.
That crazy?
It is crazy knowing what I know about Tooele.
Right?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious though, to backtrack.
Go ahead.
So you said synchronicity, it all brought you together.
Yeah, I had to fight to get that job. Like I had to change everything about my life in order to get that job. It was really, really difficult.
In what ways? What did your life look like before?
So I was working at Salt Lake County. I totally am in my head right now thinking that I sit back and have you share this story and then I interrupt. Are you okay?
I'm okay. I've got mine too.
Okay.
I'm going to share
Good.
my portion of it
Okay,
after
good.
yours. You can only tell yours.
Okay, I'm a nervous wreck.
You're doing so good. This is the opposite side.
Well, no,
We're like,
it's
"Woo."
great because just so you know, like when Tiff and I have to constantly be checking myself. Sweetheart, it's your turn to talk.
Right.
Because if not, I will just plow right through
Right.
any situation. I'll be like, hey, we did great. And she'll, I did nothing. Like, oh.
A big part of Stephanie and I's experience over the course of our relationship is me trying to alleviate her stress or alleviate her fear. And so I'm always trying to talk for her or fill the void of silence so that she doesn't feel uncomfortable and then get nervous. And we've learned over the years of how incredibly not helpful that is. And I still do it because when I get anxious, I start talking and definitely go on rants.
My favorite is how you like give me room to speak and you realize it. So you like kick me to say something, not like kick me, but like that little nudge or baby say something. And I'm like, oh shit.
when we're
Now I don't know my
recording,
name.
Under the table, I'll kick her foot or I'll...
So it's normally the opposite. Normally I'm like,
I got something to say.
all right. He'll just go and go and go and go and go for an entire podcast. We've talked about it. We've had to be aware of it because I'm like, I feel like I have good input and like you never shut up. You just keep going. He just really likes hearing himself talk, I think.
Did you guys have awareness of that coming on our show? Was that something that was kind of in the back of your minds?
Well, it's
Not
like,
even back of our mind. I try to be very conscious of it. I try to be aware of it.
because we work together and like we present together and we train together, like our team, it's always been an issue. Like it's always been an issue that I like can't ever get 2 words in. And so I'm like, okay, we can do this podcast thing, but I'm not just going to like sit on the podcast and like listen to you talk the entire time. Like we have to be aware of that and like figure out a strategy on how that can work. And we had to just be honest about it and say like, okay, if it's been a while and you've been going on and on and on and rambling, maybe just pause and look at me.
You did such a good job, Tiff, of like showing up on the podcast. That was one thing that I just loved was not just the way that you expressed yourself and the way that you shared, but you really, it seemed like you were very confident in your voice and very confident in what you were sharing. And you brought it forth in such a way that I felt like people could really hear it. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes my story is I'm always this convoluted mess of chaos, and then hopefully it makes sense to somebody. But you were just so like beautifully on point with what you were expressing.
Thank you.
And
I
all
appreciate
that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Thanks.
We, I'm going to share a little secret that we have. So when we do Zoom calls, we have a card because, like, you know, did you see Craig with his card? So he's always playing with his cards. So that was the thing.
I almost
because
brought him for that.
I was wondering if you were going to bring it.
I was going to, and then I thought, dude,
It's so funny because I flip a pin. That's my fidget
I knew
item.
not to bring a pen. I drive him crazy with my pen. But we have a card, and so we don't have little nudge. It was just like when I have something, because it's hard for me to jump in, and so I just kind of like sit and wait, and then I forget.
Yeah.
And it goes. So it was like I would like pass the card. That's like I have something, so he knows when he has that pause, or
I love
he would give it
that.
back.
so we keep it in the middle,
Yeah.
and it's like as the conversation's flowing, and then something sparks inside of you, and you want to speak, but sometimes it's hard to find that opening in
Yeah.
a conversation. So if she slides the card to her side, then I know the next pause I need to be quiet so that she can speak.
I really like that.
And
We
then
need to get the
So
card
good.
right. I thought I was supposed to give you the card.
we'll figure
We'll
it out.
figure it. There's a card, and we know we're communicating.
If the
with
card
this
is
card.
moving,
Yeah.
If I touch the
Yeah.
card, it's I have something.
We'll figure it out.
I like it.
beautiful.
That was good.
So back to COP.
Yeah.
Yes.
Copland. I wanted to get out of the gel because it was killing me, truthfully. I was just in so much depression and all sorts of different stuff. It was just a really, really hard environment to be in. So I wanted to get out onto the road. In my mind, that was going to fix everything because then you're outside. And I loved I loved law enforcement. I loved it for a bunch of different reasons.
What were those?
I have reasons that I loved it back then, and then I have reasons that I love it now, and they're similar. Back then, I loved it for, I felt like it was me tapping into all of my really good skill sets: multitasking, high-level problem solving, de-escalation. My favorite things to do were to be able to solve really dangerous, heightened situation with just my words and be able to talk people down and interact with people and connect with people so that we could diffuse the situation. I really liked doing that.
I actually remember that from you really vividly from when we worked at Trax.
Really?
Like you being the bar back and / security when like a big brawl would break out. You would be one of the first to just calmly go and like take charge of the situation.
Really?
Yeah.
So much of
see
that
that.
time's a blur for me, Tiff, so that's cool.
Yeah, I remember that
yeah,
about you. Like
that's cool.
you were just very calm and confident in those situations.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful thing that I have as far as like a skill set. And I'm grateful that I have it, but we are aware now of why I have that ability to be calm in really activated situations. And it's all stemming from childhood, and it's all stemming from trauma and having to be calm during really stressful situations growing up. So that was one aspect of law enforcement that I really liked. I also like fighting. I like hands-on. I had a history of jiu-jitsu and MMA, and I fought in the cage a couple of times, and I grew up fighting my brothers. And so like physical violence was never something that I shied away from. It's scary and it's hard, but at the same time, I can do the same thing in those situations, and I can do it in a really safe, controlled way so that somebody doesn't get hurt. And we can, if in the event that it does go to that physical place, I can resolve those situations in a way that, there's a positive outcome in the sense that nobody has to get physically hurt really, really bad. So I liked all of those aspects. It felt like it tapped into like my massive skill set in a really high level way. So I was always really excited about that. But inside the jail, it was, there's not a lot of that going on. There's a lot of de-escalation that has to take place when you worked some of the higher security housing units. Medium exact. Oh, goodness, it's okay, right? We're on a podcast, and I can go.
You're supposed to talk.
Exactly, right? Thank you.
That is what it's about.
They had minimum security, medium security, and then max security. And medium was the dangerous place. Max actually wasn't that dangerous because they were inside their cells the majority of the day.
And they were outnumbered at such a level, right? Because
typically you'd have 2 officers to a housing unit when you were working max, where in medium you had 1 officer. Same thing with minimum. And so in maximum security, I'm sure it's probably changed in some ways, right? So it's been several years. It's been 10 or 12 years, I think, maybe 14 years since I've worked there. That's awesome that I'm so far out from that space. But anyways, in max, you would only let 8 prisoners out at a time. So you'd have 2 officers to 8 guys. In medium, 1 officer, 64 guys. And medium is where everybody would basically be transitioning from minimum to max. So you'd have all the violence, all the guys that were there manipulating, playing the system, because you have guys that are in the system and that's their life, right?
Well, a lot of guys that are also on their way to prison.
Exactly.
Right? So jail is typically a holding spot, and people don't, if you don't know the Salt Lake County Jail, it's set up a lot like it's not like Mayberry where you've got a couple cells.
It's direct supervision.
Yeah, it's direct supervision, and there's housing units with 32 cells, 16 up, 16 down, 2 inmates per. And the Salt Lake County Detention Center has 1 correctional officer in the middle of it, not guarded, with no weapons other than their
little OC spray.
Yeah.
Can of make everybody cry spray, including the officer.
Including the officer. I got to witness that discharged once.
Right.
And also Yep. And by the way, there is no escaping that.
No.
For anybody
Exactly.
in the housing
I never
unit.
used it. And if another officer used it, I'd be, put that away.
Yeah. I watched
Let's just fight. I don't want to get sprayed with OC.
I watched a large Polynesian beating another inmate. And then as the officers converged, like more inmates started joining in, and so I scampered up to my cell, and it was bad. So, but again, you've got one officer in the middle of all of these inmates, and even under the best of circumstances, it's an incredibly dangerous situation. I remember being like blown away when I saw it. I was like.
And you were in the minimum part, right?
I was in the minimum,
Yeah.
because I was a white collar criminal. So
Yeah.
I was, but the same thing. It was the same. There were in the general housing, there were 62 inmates in there, and
blows my mind.
And like one of the guys was being shipped to a federal unit. One of the guys who ended up committing a crime in jail, he was being shipped to a federal unit because he was connected to some like big international gang, and he had committed some violent crime. I believe the word was that he had been participating in some murder, and he ended up beating another inmate like bad in his cell, and and there was this whole orchestration event that happened to take the officer's attention away from it so he could go and beat this guy. Like I watched the entire thing happen, and
they train us about that. Like that's a big part of like these guys are going to play games, and you really have to be on point because they will do that, right?
Yeah.
They will distract you. They will team up and work to make you look over here while they're killing somebody over here.
Literally killing somebody.
And then it was crazy because Brad, first of all, he wouldn't tell me a lot of this stuff on the phone because all the phone calls were recorded.
Right.
But like I found out after the fact, like he's in there dealing with his own survival. So like, stuff you cannot tell anybody, like not even the correctional officers because
there's no safe spot.
Yeah. Like
there's no
anybody.
secrets.
No.
Everybody knows everything.
Because if I say what I saw, then when you, the inmate, get questioned, you see inmate Lancaster reports this. So you eventually will go back to general housing and you'll say, that guy's a snitch.
Yeah.
Wow.
And now you're target.
And that label stays with you no matter where you go in the jail, right? Because they like to pretend that, inmate from housing unit 1 Charlie isn't talking to inmate in 8 Bravo.
Happens so fast.
Yeah,
like the
really
guys will be
fast.
passing between kitchen units.
Yes.
And a message will be passed.
And Brad, you're bringing up all my anxiety.
Yeah, no, it's
I hated that space.
It was.
It was so
rough.
tense.
I think it's one of the things because it's interesting. I always felt like the correction officers that we were in the same spot.
Right.
I thought, man, this is, and during moments of like, I had moments where I was being talked down to or like, talked down to by a correction officer. And one time I said, I get out of here in 32 days, you get to stay.
Yeah.
And,
That's fact,
because
right?
like we're in the same spot. You think you're in a better spot than me?
No.
No, you're
be
not.
free.
No.
When there was I'll share a story real quick and then we can move on.
Yeah.
But I was in medium. I was working a medium security unit. And like I said, that's the most dangerous.
It is interesting, by the way, because I feel my heart as well.
Right?
Like
Literally, I'm there. I can
Yeah.
smell it. I can feel it. Oh my goodness. It's
Isn't that
so
amazing
hard.
thing our brain does?
Yeah, it's a nightmare. So I'm working this medium security, and typically come on shift and get a debrief from the other officer. They would leave. You'd go around and do what's called a watch tour. There's buttons located around the housing unit that me as an officer have to go around and push once an hour, and that's the safety check. So if an officer misses their watch tour, then security, or it's not called security, gosh darn it. Basically, it's dispatch, but it's the control center. An alarm gets censored, and they'll check on you over the radio, or they'll send somebody in to check on you. So the idea is that if you're dead or they've got you tied up in one of the cells and you missed your watch tour.
It won't be more than an hour.
Right. But obviously it's a system that has many, many flaws.
So they watch you push the buttons and then they do what they want to do and they know they have an hour.
Yeah. But you have to have the card to scan the little thing that activates the buttons, and then I have to go reset the buttons, and that's how you complete a watch tour. And of course the prisoners know exactly what you're doing and exactly what that process is. Anyways, so you debrief, the other officer leaves, I do my watch tour, make sure that everything's kind of situated and ready to go for me and my shift, and then you open the doors. And you open all doors at the same time. So in this medium security unit, there's 64 prisoners. You pop all the doors. And typically in a normal day, you know, guys come out, some guys are still sleeping, guys are in their room, but you'll get a good, 20 guys maybe that come out right off the bat and go over to the phone, go to the shower, sit down at the tables, just kind of regular day stuff. This day I pop the doors and like 8 guys come out and line up at the officer's station to go outside into the rec yard. And that's basically like a big cement square where they can go out and play handball, get a little bit of sunshine, but it's completely enclosed. It's not like sunshine and grass or trees or anything. It's just a
You can see the sky, right? Because the walls are, I believe, 25 or 30 feet high.
Yeah, it's super high, so there's no way of getting out of that rec yard. Anyways, they have to line up, and then I have to open the door, so it's kind of like a controlled system of allowing people in and out, so that you don't let 64 prisoners out into the rec yard. These guys come up. Nobody else was really moving. Nobody else was really coming out of the housing units. Nobody else was coming out of their cells. These guys are just like, come on, Salazar, we want to go play handball. And I'm just like, something is wrong. I could just tell. I knew it when I got to when I walked in the unit, I could feel it.
Yeah.
And the other officer was one of those officers that kind of didn't really care about his job and kind of put his head down and just got through his shift. So he didn't have much information for me, but I could tell something was wrong. And I even tried talking to some people as I was doing my watch tour. Like, hey, because you'll have inmates that their game is working with you, but they're really working you. And so we have this mutual thing of you give me a little bit, I'll give you a little bit, kind of in a subconscious way. Mm-hmm. So I had inmates like that I could work with, even though I knew that they were working me as well. Because they're not a rat, they're not a snitch. They're playing their game, and everybody knows that they're playing their game, so they kind of get away with it. But those guys were like, what are you talking about? Everything's fine, Salazar. And I'm like, nothing is right. And these guys come up to go outside, and I almost locked them back down and sent them back to their cells because I'm like, something is really off. So I should have trusted that, but instead I let them go outside. And as soon as they went outside, 2 minutes later, 2 of them start fighting. And it turned into a really violent fight between these 2 guys. So they had some beef and they started fighting. So now I have 64 doors that need to be shut first because I can't address what's going on in the rec yard because I can't turn my back to all these other guys.
So the guys that stayed in their cell are like, I don't want to get in trouble.
Exactly.
I don't want any part of this.
Exactly. Everybody knew what was going to go on. Everybody knew this ass kicking was coming and this fight was going to happen. And so I had to lock down everybody else, which basically involved me popping the doors and making sure, and then I can see on my control board, okay, all doors appear to be locked. And at the same time, I'm radioing for backup so that we can basically now address, because we've got 8 guys out there, even though 2 of them are fighting, I don't know what else is going to happen. But it was just that was the type of thing that would happen all the time in medium, where you'd have that sense of danger all the time. I'd go into those units and I never felt comfortable. It was always that oh shit, uncomfortable feeling that didn't exist. Almost, it exists in all levels across, wherever you were in that jail, but medium, it was just so heightened and so dangerous. So I had to get out of that place. It was so important to me. But what it took for me to get out of there was Tooele City would not hire me on. I worked for them for a year as a reserve officer. And as a reserve officer, you don't get paid any money. It's basically like you're volunteering your time.
Oh, wow.
And I got to the point where I had been reserving for them for a year. And as a reserve officer, you don't really have full law enforcement capabilities because you're not technically a full-time employee. So I always had to have...
Tooele City had a reserve system. That's interesting.
I don't know if they still do.
Right, yeah.
I probably broke it. And they're like, we're never
There
doing
was
that
still
again.
reserves after you.
Was there? And it came time, I'm like, hey, I've been doing this for a year. I'm basically acting as a full, like the guys that would, because you have to have another officer with you when you're a reserve officer, because that officer is the officer, right? But those guys, at some point, they just like were chilling with me as we were cruising around doing our thing, because I had so much experience and knowledge, and as well as all my experience from the jail. So I was pretty squared away, and they still wouldn't hire me. And they're like, we'll basically allow you to go through the academy, because there's 2 certifications that you need as a police officer. You need your special functions, which is SFO, which is what I had for corrections. And then you have LEO, which is law enforcement officer. You need both of them in order to be a police on the street. You only need SFO if you're going to be a corrections officer. So I needed my LEO certification. In order to do that, I had to go back through the police academy, even though I had gone through a really long academy for the jail. And that costs a lot of money. So you have options of either self-sponsoring yourself and paying for all of it. It's like going to college or something, right? Or the department will pay for it. Mm-hmm. So Tooele agreed to pay to put me through LEO, but they would not pay me. So I wasn't an actual employee. So what I had to do was I had to quit the jail, cash out my retirement to live off of, because I still was like, I was, in my first marriage and kids and the whole 9 yards, I was still the breadwinner. So I had to cash out my retirement and basically go through the police academy, supporting myself and my family, even though they were paying for the certification process. And I just had to go through all of these hoops to basically become a police officer. And it was hard. And it was really taxing mentally, and like that financial strain of like, okay, now we don't have money for the next, I can't remember if it was 3 months or 6 months. It was a long time. And then finally I was a cop and I could go work, and it was great.
And get paid.
Yeah. Right? And about halfway through the academy, it's called POST, Utah Post. It's Police Officer Standards and Training. They're the ones that sponsor the academy. They're the ones that create all the curriculum and everything like that. They found out and realized that I wasn't quote unquote an employee of Tooele City. And they're like, you can't be here. You have to be an employee. So then they have liability coverage, right? Because now basically Post is responsible if I get hurt, and they want to pawn it off on Tooele City. So Tooele City was like, well, I thought I was going to be screwed. I thought that I was going to have to leave the academy and be without a job. Half of my retirement's gone at this point, right? And it wasn't a lot of retirement because I only had like 2.5 years in. Right. So I think it was like $8,000 at the most, right? So I thought I was going to be screwed. And then finally at the last minute, Tooele City was like, well, I guess we'll hire you. And they hired me while I was still in the academy for like the final month of it. So I was at least getting paid. And then I was a cop. And that I started in March of 2011, and then June, Steph started a short time after. And yeah, I mean, that's the type of, that's my...
Going through divorces.
Yeah, divorces. And...
You were both going through a divorce at that point?
Kinda. Yeah. It gets muddy, Brad.
Yeah, I love it.
It gets muddy, how relationships and trauma and all this stuff happens and things happen. And so, yes, I was still married when I was a police officer in Tooele, and still married during all of that time period. And then I got divorced in 2012 from my first wife. But yeah, we met, and it was this really beautiful moment of, we've actually been talking a lot about it lately because so much is going on, right? She's brand new in dispatch. And oh my goodness, if there's a harder job than being a police officer, it's being a dispatcher.
Really?
It's unreal what they are required to do at like an extremely high level. And I mean, yes, being a police officer is dangerous and hard because my, safety's at risk, or an officer's safety is at risk all the time. But the stress of knowing that, I think, and realizing that so much of the officer's safety is reliant upon what you do as a dispatcher or what dispatchers do. We're not dispatchers and police officers anymore. I keep referring
But
to.
you guys like work together closely did
Yeah.
dispatchers and police officers like
Very
work
close.
together? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we met. I went in one day and I just remember seeing her and she, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, and she's beautiful.
She is
Like,
beautiful.
Who is that beautiful?
She's a brunette, which is my favorite. And she had her back to me
I
and
had my back to everybody.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my God. It was,
and she turns around and I just see her. And instantly I'm just like, that's really interesting. And I didn't really know at the time, as far as like, because you have so many other things going on in your life and all sorts of different stuff. But it was like there was a significant shift when we made eye contact.
And what you were technically still married?
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was still married. And yeah, it was just unreal, the intensity of it. Go ahead, babe.
like, that's not how it all, like, we didn't just like have that eye contact and was suddenly like, here's our love story. You know, it was
That's
like,
how it started.
It was like,
That's when we met.
Yeah.
back to my thing. Yeah. So that's
For
just
sure.
like the meeting and how it all aligned. And then there's like all this stuff.
You had a journey to get to
I had a
dispatch.
journey to get there as well. And like, so I grew up around that. I have family members that were cops. I have family members that were firefighters. And my dad was the fire chief in a very, very small rural area. So much so that like we would do our own dispatching. And I was 16 when I started being on just like that little local radio, just talking. And then they would have to switch over to Twila occasionally to talk to them. And every time there was a switch over to Twila, I was like, I can't talk. I was so scared. So I had that like a little bit when I was young.
What
didn't realize.
town was that? If you don't mind me asking.
Tara.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a
So,
little town.
It's little. It's still just as little.
Yeah.
But so that was the thing. When it first started, it's like the radio was in our basement. So in our kitchen, that downstairs, that's where it first was. And
Seriously?
we would like talk out of there.
I didn't know that.
Until my dad got the fire station built. And then we would go to the fire station. So it was mainly my mom. And when she couldn't, then I was there, I was helping. And then just trying to be on the radio, which by the way was all the liability. There's like no reason I should, but at that age, but we didn't have anybody else.
That's
You know,
so
there was
great.
like, you used what you had, which was
Right.
little me trying to be like, okay, go here, like keep track of things. And then I left home, started working, and I think I was like 19, and my dad was trying to get me to go work for dispatch in Twila. I was like, hell no, I don't want anything to do with that. Got married. It was very traumatic relationship, and I started to work because I was going through the process. I was going to get out of this very abusive relationship, and I started rental car. And so I worked at the airport with the rental car for a while.
Were you like a stay-at-home mom during
I was
your
a
first marriage?
stay-at-home mom for like 8 years, I believe it was. And then right before rental car, actually, a job. It's when the market was big for like everybody was like unemployed. And if there was a job opening, they had tons of applicants for that. So it was really hard to get a job. And the dispatch job came open. So I applied and I made it to like the number 2 slot out of all of them. And I didn't get it. But they kept my application. They kept that on. And so then 2 years later, rental car, I get a call out of the blue saying, we have a position that's opened. We kept your application. Are you still interested in this position? We'd love for you to come interview. So I was like, okay. So I've been trying to like climb up and be able to support my kids so I could get out of this really terrible environment, get them out of there. So I went and interviewed. And then on my way back to my job, because I took off time to interview, they called me as I was on my way. They're like, we love you. We want you to have the job. We're offering you the job. Can you come take a drug test? So that was it. So I got hired on, like there was like this huge break of 2 years that would have probably changed our trajectory.
Isn't that amazing how that happens as you look back?
Right? The timing of it.
Right, the timing of it.
I fought so hard to fight, I could have been a cop for, 2 years by the time she had started. But Twillet, I had to do the reserve and I had to do this and I had to do that, just dragged their feet so much. And so we basically were 3 months apart from each other.
That's
So
cool.
we first started, yeah.
That's really crazy.
Yeah.
And so
Then we fell in love. And it was like, I started going into dispatch as often as I could. So like on a graveyard shift, and the shifts, and they're still the same now, but it's 5 to 5. So it's either 5 at night to 5 in the morning or vice versa.
Right.
So when you're working a graveyard shift and it's 3 in the morning and there's no cars to stop, and it's a Tuesday night and everybody's asleep in town except for all the people sneaking around stealing stuff out of vehicles, you'd go hang out in dispatch. And it was something that a lot of officers did. You just kind of go chill for a little bit, and they had big TVs in there and they'd be watching movies sometimes. They'd had food and they had Stephanie. And so
number 3 on the list, TV, food, and then there was this brunette in there. So like it worked.
Well, I can only imagine like the
We did have snacks.
you'd be like excited thinking if you knew her schedule, you would know she was going to be there, and if you didn't know her schedule, anticipating maybe she'll be there. You know her schedule. Okay.
Yeah. Once I it's really hard. Part of our story is difficult because we were both still married at the time. And it's hard to talk through, and it's hard to kind of share. And it's even hard for us to kind of sit in and process because there's shame.
And we didn't have all the awarenesses either. It was like there were these parts of the story that the other person didn't have information on. Awareness, like this has come over time.
Yeah.
So like just like putting all the pieces together is just like
It's that onion, right?
Whoa,
Very
yeah,
much so.
Yeah.
exactly.
Peeling back
All these
layers. Here's some
layers.
truth. Here's another level of
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah.
Here's another level of truth.
Like this
Yeah.
was going on. This was going on. Like
Yeah. And so through all of that chaos, it was like we started to connect, and we started to chat, and we started to talk. And, very quickly it became apparent to me very quickly that she was important to me. And I knew I had to make hard decisions. And so I decided to get divorced. And that was really difficult for a bunch of different reasons. And there's a whole other part of my story that makes that really difficult. But not getting divorced yes, divorce is difficult. It's just hard. It's a difficult space to talk through because of the shame, as well as there's stuff that, if we knew better, we would have done better. If we had awareness, we would have done things vastly different. Stephanie and I have copious amounts of trauma in our life and in our childhood. And so we were just doing the best that we could to survive.
yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. Like it's that process of not putting yourself through more shame, or trying to not put yourself through the shame of the decisions of your past and the societal pressure of what everything should look like, right? And I think it's the thing that I've always told Brad, when that sort of stuff happens, it's a symptom of a bigger problem. It's not you're a bad person because you made that choice. It's there's this other thing going on here, and you may or may not have very much control over it, And so I think that's important for people to understand, is like there's so many people that deal with that and like deal with the shame that comes along with it. And it's just part of life.
Yeah. Yeah, we realize that now. Like, that's the beautiful part is, we've been able to go through so much healing together. And I mean, truthfully, it doesn't just feel like that, minimizes it. Like, we know that not only were we supposed to meet in that moment, but we're supposed to be together, and we're supposed to be here in this moment. And our journey to get to this place has been just beautiful chaos. It's just such amazingness. And that once we started to kind of realize that we were drawn to each other and gravitating toward each other and wanting to spend time, but at the same time not having space to do that because of our where we were at in our relationships, then finally that space cleared up.
Yeah.
And there was so much night, like
at least on my part, and I think on yours as well, like there were just things that I was so naive.
Yeah.
And so, I guess lying to myself too, because not only I had zero intention, I was like, I wanted out of where I was at. And the thought of ever being married again, having another husband, hell no, especially a cop that has that much power. I was like in a dynamic where I had no power. And to think that I was going to try and connect with somebody that would have like I was going to, like, I joked all the time, and I realized this wasn't so much a joke, but I would joke that I was going to be a lesbian with cats. Like, do not. Like, there was, and I didn't have to worry because I wasn't like, some of the things was like, I wasn't going to fall in love with him. Like, my verbiage was, oh, he's never going to see me naked. You know? I know that's so, like, silly, but I was safe to talk.
Yeah.
Because there was never going to be anything. And I was completely lying to myself on, like, I couldn't stop thinking about him.
Right.
And every time, like, he was in my head, I was like, it doesn't matter. He's never going to see me naked. Like, this will never be a thing. He's this beautiful man. And I'm like, there's never, I'm never going to be in that position. Somebody who's not going to have the power. And I remember, like, the moment when it just clicked. Because it was a very, very scary for me. And we were, like, talking here or there, but everything was, as you would say, fine. Like, we weren't crossing boundaries. We weren't, like, everything was fine, which from is bullshit.
Right.
But at the time, what you're telling yourself is, like, we're not doing anything wrong.
Right.
All those lies.
Like, just because there's this emotional connection, like, we're...
Like, I wasn't even acknowledging that. It was just like, we're friends. I'm allowed to have friends.
Right.
Because I didn't have any. Like, I was so secluded and removed from everybody that I didn't even recognize what a healthy friendship was.
Wow.
And so it's like, we're just like, this is fine. Playing with all this fire, not being able to stop thinking about him and still being like, it's fine. I'm not doing anything wrong because I didn't have any conscious intent, and all the subconscious stuff I was like... pushing away, not really acknowledging. And I remember you telling me that I could message you, like, anytime, like a day or night, that you were like, that was your way of saying you were there for me. And I remember being like that was my, like, line crossed. And I was like, I don't think your wife would like that. Like, here we go. And you told me then I left. Or how did you say? Like, I left, I'm staying.
Yeah,
like, you had moved out.
That was the shift for me, where it's like I separated and we were going to start the divorce process, and I moved out of the house. And so it was basically like my way of signaling to her that it's like, we can talk whenever you want.
I got the message. It's like nothing good.
We can talk whenever you want now.
Yeah, we had kept it platonic. I can see now how, like, that was like we were lying to ourselves. But at the time, I didn't have awareness of it, and I don't know that you did. Maybe you did.
I knew that I had feelings for you.
I kept them.
Well, it was like I had
right?
I love
it's
you
convoluted.
I
this
just
is
want to
so
say,
beautiful.
I had a very similar situation as I was leaving. I had somebody...
Not with me.
It
though.
wasn't Brad, though. That's the funny thing.
Yeah.
Somebody that I trusted in, that I was working with, to talk to about the things that I was going through in my first marriage that was abusive also. And I am very similar to you in the fact that I was like, well, we haven't done anything. Like, I look forward to talking to him, and he's like a really good friend. But I was telling myself the same thing. It was just that, right? But I'm so grateful for that. And Brad and I talk about it because it was what gave me the courage to leave, and realize that there's more, that I don't need to settle.
Yeah.
For this.
I find, like, I just have to say, like, first of all, you're as you grow through themes of consciousness, you have to break into courage.
Yeah.
And you have to move through that. And
that's exactly what happened when Steph and I met.
Yeah. And I get goosebumps as I think about, like, how courageous that was, because you were honoring commitments while at the same time honoring your heart. And
that
so
there was a shift happening.
Yeah.
And how much control do we have over those shifts that are happening,
and I get into still being human, I still get into like comparison things, and I'm like, oh, that's nothing.
It's because I'm not sharing everything, Brad.
I get it. But I'm just saying, like,
Trust me, it's something.
I trust you. Yeah. And, but it's just beautiful to watch, like, how this connection happened, and then courage grew out of it.
Yeah.
Because Tiff was like such a big part of me, like, finding true courage and saying, this is what I need to stand for. This is on my own. So that maybe she and I can come together, so we can then see what goes from there.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's courageous, and I'm
Thank you.
sticking with that.
We had a moment when. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just say, as soon as like he had said that, like I felt like I knew
Yeah, something shifted.
it, and I was like, that courageous came out, or crazy, but I was like, all of my. Like, I'm not doing these, we're done. And I, like, all of the stuff, like, I would be singing Adele songs in the car and thinking of him and trying so hard to not. But as soon as, like, that happened, I very consciously made decisions, very consciously.
Well, he became available, and it became a real possibility.
Right. But I still wasn't. I was still in an unsafe space.
Yeah.
I was just willing to say, because I was like, the process was getting out of this. My heart wasn't committed. It was like, how do I save my kids and myself?
Yeah.
It was so dangerous. So I didn't feel a betrayal of the heart, but it was like that safety. And just allow, like, as soon as like you said, he became available, all of those feelings that I was like trying to keep back here, I think I don't think, like, I won't lie. I was going to be like, I think I was already in love with him. Yeah. And as soon as like that was said, all of them were up here, and it was like, holy shit. I was so scared. I am so excited, and I don't think I've stopped getting butterflies since. It's just like all of that came forward, and I was taking risks that I never thought I would take. I was taking all these chances. I was taking steps, courage. And who I was, like, that gave me strength. As you said, it gave you the strength, because that changed who I was. And even in the sheriff's office, where I should not have had to worry about violence happening, it was still happening. And so then I had to hide it. Not only from everyone, but like, oh my gosh, the embarrassment that I had. Cause like I so much shame that goes into abuse, and somehow all of it becomes your fault. And if you're not doing something, it's your fault. And if you're not leaving, it's your, like, all of the crap that society puts on you and all the ways that you feel stuck. But I shifted, and I got really strong, and it was like, boom, like stopping. Things were stopping. He was still like coming at and being like crazy, but then it was like that. Yeah, I'm sorry, my ex. But then it was like that panic of trying to like save. It was in that moment where he could feel the slip and he could feel my power. It was a power dynamic that shifted, and I was like, no more. And I was safe. And so much of it also had to do with Craig, like looking at me and saying, no more, you are safe. And so our courage, everything just shifted. And so
I
my babies.
I remember getting to a point thinking about you all the time. I memorized your license plate. Like, I was a hell of a good cop. And like, I was, in my mind, and I mean, it's my own opinion of myself, is also, I was the cop that I wanted, right? I was the cop that I would expect all cops to be. And I was really, really good at it. And part of that was, I mean, I remembered license plates, I remembered vehicles, I remembered faces. You know, I knew I could drive, you know, busy 4-lane Main Street at, you know, middle of the day, Twilla, lots of traffic, all that chaos. And I could see the one car and know that that was the car and that was the person in the passenger seat. And I knew that they had a warrant, and I knew all these different things. I just had so much information in my head. So it was really easy to memorize Stephanie's license plate as well as her car and everything. So I was always looking for, and if I saw a car that was similar, I would think it was her. And sometimes I would turn around to follow her or follow the car that I thought was her. Not in, like, obviously I'm not going to pull her over, but it's just like I wanted her to also see me, and I wanted to see her. And so I was becoming very, very, I just couldn't stop thinking about her. And I knew I had infidelity in my first marriage prior to that. And we actually got divorced before we got divorced twice. We got divorced, and then we actually got remarried, and then we got divorced the second time. And when we got remarried, it was the commitment to myself that I was never going to do that again. I was never going to put my first wife as well as my daughters through that experience. And then suddenly I found myself in this space where I couldn't stop thinking about Steph. And I got to a point where I could feel it inside, and I was like, I had to do something, because I wasn't going to go down the path of what I had done previously. And it had gotten to a point where I couldn't, like you said, right? I mean, it was like songs, and it was music, and it was like every opportunity. There were a couple of times over the course of our career when we were working the same shifts. So that meant that it was easy to spend time together, because I could go chill in dispatch. And it was like, I can't get this girl out of my mind. And so I had to make a hard decision. And that's like, I remember I made the decision, and then I don't know how long after that, right? Maybe probably a month or two after that, finally having the conversation about like, we're getting a divorce. You know, it wasn't that easy. It was a horrible conversation. And then that was, you know, all of that goes through, I'm experiencing all of that on my end. And then it comes to that point where it was like, hey, we can talk whenever we want to talk now, if you want to talk. And then we had a night, we had this, because sometimes we were on opposite shifts, and we would kind of like pass in the night. We had this spot where we would go and talk to each other for 5 or 10 minutes before she had to go home, or I was coming off duty, or I was getting on duty. And we would always stay in our own cars, and we would just sit there and talk to each other. And I don't know, and it's not really important, but whether this happened before the decision to separate and get a divorce, or if it happened after, but it was all in those muddied. Do you?
Mm-hmm. It was after.
Was it?
Yeah.
That makes me happy. That makes me feel proud of myself.
Yeah, we definitely were not to the point when I said I wouldn't even like allow that conversation of, you would just open the door for the conversation of like any time. Mm-hmm, and I was like, So we definitely were not like, I remember.
It was after.
It was after.
So we had this moment when we're sitting there parked next to each other and we're talking, and I asked her if I could like touch her hand. And she was like, yeah. It was super nerve-wracking. Like, it was nerve-wracking for me to ask, as well as like it was really hard for her to say yes. And we just kind of reached out, and we just touched, and we held hands. And it was like, we're done. There's nothing else after this. Oh. And everything became about making it work. And we had to do a lot of stuff. I think that like part of, I have a lot of trauma from being a police officer. I was able to help a lot of people, and I'm really grateful for that. And I had a lot of really beautiful relationships with the people that I worked with, and a lot of really cool experiences. But it's the shadow and the light, right? Of all those beautiful experiences that I had, on top of, I fully believe that I stepped into that space and went through all of those things to meet Stephanie, as well as be able to facilitate that type of protective energy in her life during that transition of what she was leaving and what she needed, because I can be a really strong presence if I need to be.
I had babies to save.
And I made sure that everybody was really safe, her and her kids, and my kids. They're my kids. I made sure that everybody was safe, because it was scary.
It was really scary.
It was really scary and really nerve-wracking.
It stayed scary for a long time.
It did. It stayed scary for a long time. It's not scary anymore. We just have the remnants of the anxiety and the fear now.
I can still feel it.
I know.
Is he still in the picture, or no?
No.
Yeah.
No, not anymore. But yeah, we touched, and that was it. And then everything became about us, and it was so beautiful, and it was so. It's literally the flip, right? It's we had so much light and so much glory and so much amazingness when we would connect, and all these different things that we started to experience. And finally we were able to start going out on dates together. And like all of this, we waited until she was separated as well. Like we had the touching of the hands, but then still just nothing else until she basically came to me and said, we can talk now whenever you want to talk. And then it was like, well, we got to go on a date.
Yeah, it was it wasn't separated as there wasn't the freedom. We were still, I want a divorce. And that was and there was this catalyst moment of where I was brave enough to say that and
well, yeah, but abusers don't say, "Oh, you want a divorce? Okay, see you later."
Exactly.
That's not what
it
happens.
was such a process for me too.
Yeah.
I can relate so much. You and I have very similar stories, and but it's so freeing to be the one.
Tiff wasn't
to say,
divorced when we got together either.
No, well, and he refused to. I mean, we were engaged before I got a divorce officially. He wasn't willing to.
Yeah, so
sign
and the whole when you talked about when we were together the first time, you talked about being able to protect, and if that were taken away, it was such a key part for me as well, to come in and be a physical presence and an emotional presence and a verbal presence and any other kind of presence I needed to be to protect. And
what was so cool was that I brought everybody with me. At the time, I was working with two men that became brothers to me, and we were this dynamic trio, Three Musketeer, whatever you want to call it. We were we were so in sync with each other that, they would key up the microphone and say one word on the microphone, and I knew exactly what they were going through and what they needed. And 2 minutes later, I was there because I was. Do you know what I mean? We were so in tune and connected. It was that whole cerebral thing where I knew what they were thinking, they knew what I was thinking. So as we moved through our jobs as law enforcement officers, it was so on point all the time. And I was with those guys and working together with those guys during this time period. Yeah. So I brought my crew.
Brought backup.
I brought backup to the protection and to the space, and they showed up. You know what I mean? They had my back. As now Stephanie was enveloped within the, safety of these three incredibly strong, powerful cops. That there's no winning against that.
Right.
Well, and I have to imagine that the camaraderie, because you were also one of them.
Exactly.
You were part of that cop family, right?
Exactly. So the guy was kind of screwed.
Yeah, it made a huge difference because it was that violent towards women, violent towards kids. He was very powerful and scary. Ooh. And other men, it was just he was just so aggressive. He's one of those, if you look at him, it's the other person needs to look away or he's going to make you. It was just out there. But when it came to law enforcement, he was always, boom, yes, sir. Yes, sir. There was something about law enforcement that he would always and back away from. And I was lucky enough because there's dynamics of abuse where they don't let the other person work. They don't let them leave. And I wasn't allowed to hang out and do things, but he was so you don't contribute, you're not doing anything, you need to make money. And so everything that I did was never enough. So he wanted me to work.
He needed your income.
He needed the income to support his habits, to support, he couldn't keep all of this. So he needed this. And then I ended up in the perfect place. So it all just worked out. So when it came time to, because I've left him before and it did not go well. I wasn't safe. We weren't safe and I went back. But leaving this time turned that cycle of abuse. It brought out the honeymoon phase to where he was trying to be best behavior. And then you would spiral out and go crazy and then come back. But just that safety that Craig brought, that everyone else brought, and that where I was this abuse stops now. But he spiraled out so bad. And then it was really hard because he used the legal system for a while. He had to still have access to the kids until he was just so spun out that we could take that because it just wasn't safe. And it was terrible whenever he had the kids. It wasn't he was a good dad. He wasn't.
It was scary for you.
It was not just scary for me, but what the kids went through.
Oh.
Did he take it out on them?
So many things.
Yeah, it was a nightmare because it was all
nightmare.
That custody stuff, right? Where every other weekend, and we tried to kind of honor that process because because you almost have to in a sense, right?
You do. Yeah.
And it's such
scary.
a joke, and it's so hard. And so you kind of are doing what you have to do. And then like Steph, I mean, because he was an addict and it's just all sorts of different stuff. And finally it got to the point where we're just like,
You're done.
yeah, we're not doing this anymore.
Yeah. It was very similar in my situation. He was a little more, so my ex put on this big show for everybody else. Everybody thought he was very charismatic, and, everybody thought he was a great guy. So when I left, everybody was like, I was working at the bar. So it was almost like, yeah, she's a bartender. And so, she's breaking up her marriage for that. And I was kind of like, not everybody believed me. So, and he, came off as this amazing dad, and he was very manipulative to my boys. And so they believed he was an amazing dad. He was always feeding their mind. It was so psychological. Because I worked at a bar, I was a terrible person, and he was the one that was always there. He was the hero. He painted this picture to my kids. And, but I found out after the fact. So I left, and of course honored that process of letting him have the kids. And he actually went for 50-50 custody and got it. And it was really hard because I escaped that abuse. And a part of me thought, like, he loves his kids. He's going to be a good dad. But it wasn't until it started becoming very apparent, like he was abusing his girlfriends in front of my daughter, stuff like that. And my kids, my boys especially, lied to protect him. But I found out after the fact that he did stuff like he burned my son with a cigarette, and would have them come over just to clean his house. And if they didn't clean his house, he would freak out. And so I still deal with the guilt of like subjecting them to that for so long before figuring out, that he was still the same person.
That's a heavy guilt.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so glad you are free of that. Yeah. How does that work? Remind me. I think you went over it, but I can't remember. Is he like completely out of the picture as well?
It's kind of the same scenario. He eventually spun out and just kept, running away from all of these shadows that he was dealing with, and would never own it, never take accountability, and abused every girlfriend that he dated after me, and eventually succumbed to drug abuse. And he's homeless on the streets right now, and has nothing to do with my kids, and hasn't seen my daughter in how long? It's
been over 3.5 years.
Yeah, which, I mean, the last time he had my daughter, he had an apartment. He was staying at the Kirk Hotel. And I think it was my son that was like, Mom, Dad is posting crazy stuff on social media that doesn't make any sense. And he had my daughter like at his house, and it was like the middle of the night. So it was obvious he was on something. And he's like, we need to go get her right now. And I'm like, well, I'm going to need your help, because it's not like he's just going to let me like stroll into his house when it's his weekend to go get her. And so he actually like called his dad and kind of manipulated him so that we could get my daughter back. And that was the last time.
Actually, he and I went to his house.
Yeah.
And because I thought because at the time he was only 16 or 16, it was Trenton. And he was not a physical match for his dad at the time. And so I said, well, I'll be there with you. And Trenton said, I can get Taylor in, but I don't know what will happen. And it was, that was like an incredible bonding moment, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, when we talk about protecting, at that point, he was my son. And even though he's going to see his biological father, I'm his dad. I'm the one.
Well, and one of the things Trenton often talks about, like in BJJ, he's like, he started doing it. He wasn't vocal about it at first, but now he'll say things like, I now know that if I need to, I can take my dad. I can handle my dad. So it's been a powerful thing for him.
Yeah. So many synchronicities as I listen to your guys' story. I just feel one of the beauties of synchronicities is this idea of connection, of like universal connection. And I don't really get it all. I just understand that energy is real. I can't explain how electricity works. Like I can't explain really how. I mean, I know there are people who do until ultimately like the origins of it. We can't, right? And
I like Wi-Fi.
yeah, exactly. But I know it's real, and we're grateful for it. So I'm incredibly grateful sitting here listening to you guys. You said at some point, like I look at you guys and just see so much beauty and so much of that energy and love. So you guys got together. You did.
Yeah, we were each other's perfect opportunity to.
Do you call yourself soulmates? Curious.
You know, we don't necessarily. I mean, yes, we're soulmates, but it's in our minds that's so, and it's verbiage, right? It doesn't really matter what. I mean, twin flames, soulmates. I mean, truthfully, Stephanie and I have been together forever, and that doesn't mean the 40 years that we've been on this planet.
Right.
We are together everywhere. We are together here. We're together over there. Every dimension, every realm, every space time continuum that you can possibly imagine. There's a Stephanie Craig version doing all of this beautiful work together in the sacred love that her and I have and share, and that we are fully aware of at this point in our life. And we've been aware of it for, gosh, I think when we got married was kind of, because we got married in 2015, we officially kind of started dating and got together in 2012 after all the previous relationships had come to an end. And then we moved in together in 2014, bought our house together in 2014, and then we got married in 2015. And
it was like January 2014.
Yeah, January 2014, right, in the winter.
Yeah.
We got to do all of our shadow work in the wintertime. And
so many of us do.
Right? Well, that's when you're supposed to do it.
I think so.
And yeah, we get together, we marry, and our we now can see the synchronistic events around our marriage and our actual, like we chose a specific day for, we also had like a spiritual awakening once we got together. So Steph's always been this really cool, connected, beautiful person inside. And I have too. I just don't think either of us really became aware of it or realized it. But we've always been connected to...
I had to shut mine down. I was told it was evil. And I was like, oh, I'm evil.
Yeah.
So much of it was like...
Yeah, so much of, society and upbringing and everything like that. But as we started to kind of wake up spiritually, and this was during that time period, mm-hmm. This was during our union and coming together, during that time period of being a police officer and being a dispatcher, we really started exploring the space of spirituality and learning about it and realizing, because you start to learn about energy or spirituality or healing or these different modalities and, chakra systems and meditation and all this stuff that exists out there. It's like when you suddenly open the door to that space, it just comes rushing in at you. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh my gosh. And then you start to, Ram Dass has a beautiful quote, and it's like, as soon as you separate from nonlinear is when you start to see synchronicity. So the idea being that nonlinear thinking, right? Everything is so linear in this plane and everything is this progression. But as soon as you separate from that linear way of thinking and into the nonlinear, then you start to see the synchronistic events. And so as we started to learn about spirituality and energy during the beginning phases of our relationship that correlated kind of with this spiritual awakening or reawakening, then I start to realize, like, I would meditate and I would see stars. And then I realized that when I was a little boy, I'd be laying in bed and I'd close my eyes and I would see the same stars. And suddenly it became really clear to me that I had been connecting to the universe from the time I was little. And that was the place that I would go to disappear and feel safe. And so it's really beautiful to start to remember some of these things and have awareness of these things. Then I start to realize how much like magic I had as a little kid and how connected I was, and all these rocks and crystals and stones. And I have a rock that came from the ocean. It wasn't the first time that I had ever been to the ocean, but it was kind of the first time that I remember being at the ocean. And I was 10 years old or 11 years old, and we had gone for a family trip. and I found this stone in the sand, and I brought it home, and I've had it ever since. And I used it during the spiritual awakening time period, and I would place it on my forehead and on my third eye and use it to connect. But I've always had stuff like that. I've always had stones and crystals and different things like that, but I had forgotten about all of that stuff because it was not important and it wasn't real. And do you know what I mean? I've always had dreams that had significance, and but I just remembered all of this stuff suddenly. So the synchronicity is suddenly realizing, oh, wait a minute, I've always been this way. I've always felt this. I've always seen these things and believed in this greater magic that exists. And then she's got the same stuff. And then we start having like out of body experiences together during spiritual practices that create a knowingness of our love in other places. We were in the shower once. I'm going to tell this pretty story.
Okay.
We were in the shower. We shower together probably 75% of the time. And we were in the shower together, and the water was falling, like the shower head was, between us, and she was on one side of it and I was on the other side of it. And I moved through the shower, like I moved through the water, and at the same time I could feel me in some other form somewhere else in nature moving through a waterfall and coming towards her. And it was like this synchronistic experience of out of body where I could tell that I was having the experience, in our shower, in our house, but then I was also connecting to the experience happening the exact same time somewhere else. And we were ourselves in the sense of our energy, but we were some other, like Steph and I have a belief that we're fairies in some realms, and we've got a lot of fairy energy and magic, and like legitimately we're just fairies. And so that experience was like, oh my gosh, this was Fairy Craig moving through this beautiful waterfall and seeing Stephanie in that space. And so we've had those type of experiences almost our entire relationship, almost as if like when we touched the first time, it just lit everything up and everything started to correlate and connect. And I think that was the moment of like truthfully, if I think about it, I think that's when I kind of separated from the linear concept of time and reality, was that first touch with her.
Remembrance that.
It just sparked something that I had to know what was around the corner, like what's next, it was like suddenly, and then everything just unfolds, and it unfolds at this beautiful rapid pace that, we could, 6 hours into this podcast and we'd be 3 years into our relationship of beautiful experiences that we've had together. But go ahead.
It was like our dynamics were so different at that point, because like when we had that moment, and it was like, I remember the shower. I remember like we had so many of these moments where we would see each other. But like that touch, that remembrance, he like zoned in and just was like focused. And I went and ran. I like laughed. I drove my car. I gave a quick little, like, I remember kissing your hand. I just felt this and was like, and then and off I went. Like I was scared. Like it took me a while to stop running. It was like, oh, this is amazing. Yeah. And I would just like, it was like there all of this there, but I didn't know how to like really sit in that emotion and that intensive emotion and that much. So I would get scared.
I think when you've been in an abusive relationship, you don't want to get fooled into anything ever again. For me, that was my experience. Like I can remember any time that I felt me and Brad almost getting too serious. I was like, and I told him, I'm never getting married again. I'm not getting married.
We both had that same thought. I was like, cool, we're just going to keep it real for the next 50 years, right?
Yeah. We were kind of, I think we told you guys, we got married so that his kids could come to our house and spend the night, so we could be an actual, because it was in his divorce decree that they couldn't spend the night in a house where he was cohabitating.
Oh, wow.
Without being married. So I was like, okay, well, fuck it. If it's
with a member of the opposite sex, I could have cohabitated with a dude.
Roommate or whatever.
Right. Yeah, he could have turned gay and that would have been cool. But anyway, yeah. But my attitude at the time was, well, if it's just a piece of paper, it's just a piece of paper. That goes both ways, right? Like, we've already celebrated our union, and we were at that point we were solid. But yeah, like I totally can resonate with the fear of like what is happening? Yeah. Is this real?
So I'm really curious. So you were a cop and you were in dispatch. How long did that last? And now you guys are involved in the work, what we call the work again. And it seems like that's
our gig, man.
That's your deal.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. I'm really curious, and I know we've been going for a while, but I'm really curious about what happened from there to here, because I see you guys in listening to your podcast, like you guys are doing the work.
We did it on the way here.
Right.
Like it was panic as we got closer because we were in the thick of it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to show up a miserable mess and not be able to be present on the podcast. And I was, we do it.
It's so funny how the universe works that way, right? Like
we
really
were specifically talking about awareness and presence on our way down here, and the power of that and the development of that, and how it just never stops, because I've been going through it myself the past few weeks. We've had some trauma, had some things brought up, and it just, it's easy to slip back into these cycles of lower levels of consciousness. It's the only way I can describe it at this point, of fear and anxiety and shame and guilt and all that stuff. So you guys were police officers, police force.
Dispatch?
Yeah,
Dispatch.
It really shifted when we got married, and we have just recently realized that, because we had all of this spiritual stuff that was going on during that early phase of our relationship, and we were having so many beautiful experiences, and we both had like I was bringing that type of thought process, that the experiences that I was having, I was bringing to law enforcement and having real world application with them.
Oh, cool.
Where it was like I could put out the energy. One of my favorite things to do was get on night shift, and day shift had been dealing with something. Maybe there was a vehicle burglary or a break-in or something like that, or they had somebody that they were looking for, basically. And then you pass that information on to the next shift just in case they come across that person. Well, my favorite thing was if they had something like that, I'm like, sweet, I'm going to go find them. And then I would just set that intention, and I would go out on patrol and just feel. And just be like, I'm going to go left. I'm going to go left. I'm going to turn around. And there were countless times where, within 2 hours, somebody would be in handcuffs. And, my sergeant at the time just kind of got to the point where he chuckled, because I'd be like, okay, Don, I'll be back in a minute. I'm going to go get him. He's like, okay. And then an hour later, Craig would come back with that person in handcuffs.
We were changing shifts because we were lucky enough when we were together that we would be opposite shifts.
Yeah, at this point where we had kids, and
so somebody was always home with the kids, which was sucked for us not seeing each other very well, but somebody was always with the kids. But if we were working on something shitty with like a scary person, I was like, God damn it. Because I knew as soon as Craig came on, he was finding the person, and he always did. I remember just damn it.
Yeah.
And you were scared because he's going out into this dangerous situation, and you knew.
And I knew he was the one that was going to find him.
Well, I'm curious if you guys used the the tactic of creating the bubble and kind of protecting your own energy with all of that harsh, crap that was
So
going
I
on
know
before.
Stephanie was protecting me all the time.
Yeah.
I could always feel that. It wasn't just when she was on duty, because there were times where we'd be working the same shifts. So when I would radio into dispatch, I would be talking to Stephanie. And so she was always protecting me, even if that wasn't the case, right? Even if she wasn't on the same shift, I could always feel that kind of in the back of my mind. And then
literally, he would pull out, and I would have the bubble around his car, and I would see it, and I would take that time where he would drive through, and it would engulf and protect us so much.
Yeah, and I did dangerous stuff. I was the guy that would go after the really. There's officers that don't do that. There's officers that, just like at the Joe, or the guys that ate and skate and aren't worried about stuff. There's cops on the street that aren't going to go out and find the criminal that is wanted for X, Y, or Z, right? I was not one of those guys. I wanted to go find them. I wanted to pull over the scary cars. I wanted to get out on foot in the middle of the night and go walk the really sketchy neighborhoods and do all that kind of stuff.
And also the really hard scenes that were like rip your heart on shred. I knew he was the one, and he was like,
yeah,
always there.
That was that's a whole other space. There was a lot of trauma, because that's the other thing that, like, not only do you not realize there's like 3 officers on duty, but officers deal with death all the time. And it's not every now and then, it's on a very, very regular basis. And of course you don't show up when it's just somebody passing away in their sleep, right? You show up when it's the worst case scenarios. And so I had a lot of that. So I was bringing all that energy, concept, idea, spirituality, practice, energy practice to this real world application. And I was getting like daily confirmations of like, shit, this shit's real. This is working. I'm in the flow of this stuff. And I could also I remember there was a time we were on scene at like this domestic, and this dude was just hopping. He was ready to go. It was the type of situation where, one little tiny wrong move by the officer engulfs and creates a chaotic situation where somebody's getting hurt.
All the fire it just needed a little spark.
Just
and
barely, right?
Fuel, right?
And that guy's ready. He's wanting it, and he's poking, and he's trying to get that spark from the cops. And the other officer that was the first officer on scene was trying to really do his best. And I decided I was just going to shift it with my energy. So I didn't engage, because normally those are the situations that I excel at. I could go into those situations and calm that dude down and everything would be okay. But I thought, let's see. So I got real curious, and I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. I was still cognitive of like officer safety, and I was still on point in regards to that. But behind the scenes, I just shifted my energy. And suddenly it started to change, and suddenly this dude started to calm down, and suddenly everything just kind of mellowed and chilled out. And I was like, holy shit. I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. I just shifted my vibration to this space of love or whatever. I didn't even realize it was love at the time, right?
That's amazing.
It was really cool. So I was having like real world application for all of these spiritual things
spiritual truths.
Yeah.
Right?
Like universal truths.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Universal
the things that I
truths.
was learning, I was implementing in this really amazing, beautiful way. But when we got married in 2015, it's almost like we had this beautiful courting period where we got to connect and glimpse the beauty of our connection and of, this universal love that Stephanie and I exist in all places. We got to see it. And I think we got to see it and glimpse it and feel it and envelop ourselves in it at times for what came when we got married. Because when we got married in 2015, we got married in April of 2015, went on our honeymoon. Like, I was a cop when we got married, and then we went on our honeymoon, and I got back, went to work, and immediately put on admin leave, and basically was never a cop again. That was the shift when I got fired. So as soon as Stephanie and I said I do, and we got married, the universe said, yes, you did the hard work. You're not a cop anymore. And that fucked everything up on the surface, right? But behind the surface, that was what was needed. Because if I would have stayed a cop, we would have spiraled into chaos, because I was breaking. There were so many things that were tearing me apart and starting to create so much tension in our relationship. And I mean, I was just going through so much difficult stuff because of what I was under. I had like back-to-back experiences that really fucked me up. Having to be on scene and witness and kind of be in the thick of some things that weren't dangerous as far as safe. Some of them were really dangerous, but just the worst of the worst traumatic experiences that nobody should have to go through. And I was the officer that was on scene and the first guy on scene. So it was taking a toll on me. And so luckily, like, the universe had my back and said, you don't need to be a cop anymore, dude.
So do you think, had that not happened, would you have quit on your own?
No, because I was so dead, like, that was me. I was a cop. I
Your
had
identity
found
was
my
tied in that.
calling.
Yeah.
I was a SWAT team. I was it was my path. I was going to retire in this beautiful career of a law enforcement officer that, that was the passion of my life because I had finally found my calling. So I wasn't going to quit.
Do you mind going into why they decided to fire you? How did that come about?
I'm happy to talk about it. It's confusing because it's not clear. It's not black and white that people like to think that it is. Mm-hmm. So because I was going through all of these things.
That was in 2015?
2015. And because I was going through all of these traumatic experiences, law enforcement has a terrible, they just don't take care of their officers.
Especially not from a mental health standpoint.
I mean, right. They just don't. So I would go.
You shut it down, you hide it.
Yeah,
Just like the
don't
military.
like anything.
Same thing with the
Exactly.
military.
Yeah, the level of compartmentalizing that it has to take place. And what was really frustrating is you'd go on scene on something, like I would go to a suicide where somebody had just shot themselves in the head with a shotgun. So that's a little bit different than some other type of gun, right? A shotgun does a lot more damage to a person. And because I was the type of officer that I was, if I was working, those things tended to happen around the corner from me so that I was right there. I was I was like 99% of the time I was the first officer on scene, even if I had to respond from the other side of town. Because I'm that type of cop, right? If there's danger and somebody needs help, I'm going to show up and help that person. So I'm the first guy on scene, even to the point, Brad, where I could when I walked into the house, I could still smell it. You could still smell the gunpowder in the air. There were so many times that I showed up and I could still smell the gunpowder. And you could still feel the mist of, like, bluntly, the blood matter. Like, you could still feel it in the air. Mm. And so I had a lot of those type of experiences that were slowly breaking me inside. But I didn't realize it. So I would go to a scene like that and basically just have to witness, handle, sit with the person, because in that specific case, his wife was in the living room and he was in the bedroom. So you have to be in that energy, right, for a while when you're a cop. It's not just kind of like showing up and then leaving. So I would show up on those scenes and be in those spaces for quite a while. And then you clear that call and you go pull somebody over for running a stop sign, or go talk to the old lady that's upset because their neighbor's dog keeps shitting in their yard, or I have to go back to the police department and make a phone call for somebody that wants to complain about, some neighbor dispute because they kicked a hole in their fence. So to be able to go from
yelling at you, cops never do anything, and
right,
like, just every bit of aggression is coming out on you.
Yeah. So you have to compartmentalize all of that stuff in order to do your job. In a perfect world, something like that would never happen. We'd have a super healthy mental health system in place where people treated mental health and emotional health as the utmost importance from birth. That's the perfect world. But on our way to that perfect world, police officers would then get to go home after that. And there would be such a amount of police officers out to help that, basically if you had to experience something like that, your shift was over for the day and maybe for the next 2 weeks.
I was going to say for a while.
Right. Yeah. And you immediately had support and you had people there to help you and you had mental health professionals, and that's an ideal situation. That's not what it is. You have to go on to the next thing and work your 12-hour shift. Oh, and so that started to really take a toll on me, but I didn't realize it. And the way
you were trying to do the good cop thing and just stuff. And
exactly. Because you have to. That's your job, right?
Right.
And I prided myself on, like, if that type of stuff happened, I wanted to be there because I knew how well I could do in those situations. There were times that I would talk people down. There was a lady once who was she had a gun pointed at her chest, and her child called. Dad, who was at work, Dad gets in the car and starts flying home and calls dispatch. So mom's in the bedroom with a gun pointed at her chest and just her kids are home, no other adults. I'm the first one on scene, and it takes me about 45 minutes to get her to put the gun down, and we're able to get her help and everything's okay and nothing happens, right? So there was so much of that stuff. And then there were just the random accidents. Like, that's the really frustrating thing. There's beauty in it if you look at it from the big perspective of the universe and we separate from the linear time frame, that there's beauty in even chaos. But at times, literally just accidents, like nobody's at fault. This is just an accident and somebody loses their life. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is horrendous. It's so sad and it's so difficult. So imagine, 2-3 years of that on a regular basis. I was breaking inside, but I didn't realize it. And so the way that it would manifest is I was very stern and short, kind of the no BS, somebody wants to talk and start popping off. I'm like, let's go, you're under arrest, put your hands behind your back, we're done. That type of mentality, because I had a very short fuse. And I never did anything as far as like excessive force. I never hurt anybody. I never shot anybody. I didn't beat up somebody that didn't deserve it. I never even beat up anybody because I had jujitsu. And that was like...
So you could subdue.
Oh my God, it was such a lifesaver for everybody, right?
Right.
Other officers would have to tase and, eventually do all this other stuff. And I'm like, let's just get him on his back and get my hooks in. And it's super easy to get somebody in handcuffs if you know jujitsu. So I never hurt anybody physically, but I was mean and I was rude and I didn't have a lot of patience for people. And we had a call one night where these two sisters got into a fight. It's that hotel that's down there by the 7-Eleven. So right next to the PD, because the police department used to be there. Mm-hmm. And it was a slow night and everybody showed up to it because everybody was bored. So lots of officers were on scene and I was one of the last guys to show up and I was just hanging out because at this point there's nothing to do. We're just kind of chilling on scene. And this girl was really drunk and she'd been fighting with her sister. It was like the sisters took all the kids to the swimming pool for the night and got hotel rooms to have a fun night of pizza and swim in. But then sisters get drunk and fight. And she's yelling at us and, yelling and popping off and doing all sorts of different stuff that drunk people do, which is total. I mean, obviously I worked at the bar back in the day, so I was totally used to it. And she started yelling at me, which I don't care. I'm totally fine with that. And I was standing on the outside of her hotel room and she kept going in and out of the hotel room because she'd go in and she'd be in the hotel room yelling at us and then she'd come out and yell and nobody was doing anything about this. But because I wasn't the first guy on scene, typically if it's your call, you're the first guy, you're kind of managing it and maybe the sergeant will help you with this, that, or the other. But if you're a backup officer, you're just there to help. Tell me what to do, right? Nobody was doing anything about this. And it's not like she was a threat or anything, but she comes to the hotel, like she comes to the door and it's open because they had propped the door open. And she starts yelling at me and I'm just like, okay, right. I'm not here to do anything. I don't know why you're yelling at me. And then she starts physically making contact with me, poking me in the chest. It's funny, huh?
Yeah.
That we have awareness. Now, my dad used to do that when I was a kid. That's how my dad would discipline us. He'd back us up against the wall and poke me in the chest. So here we are again with synchronicity and being able to expand outwards nonlinear and see the correlation between why this might have triggered me a little bit. She starts poking me in the chest. Mm-mm. And I'm like, you need to stop that. And she fuck, keeps poking me in the chest. And I came from the jail where if somebody was being shitty, you just put them in handcuffs, right? Mm-hmm. And in the jail, you can do that because they're technically already detained. So you have your Fourth Amendment rights of unlawful detainment and all this kind of stuff. But if you're in jail, you're already detained. So I can put you in handcuffs whenever I wanted if you're in jail. I didn't have to have probable cause to do that. So I kind of took that mentality out to the street. And in my mind, she wasn't under arrest, but she's going in handcuffs and she's going to go sit in a patrol car so that she can relax because she's not contributing to the de-escalation of this situation. So she pokes me in the chest. I try to stop her verbally for a minute and she doesn't stop. And I'm like, okay, you're going in handcuffs now. She's 115 pounds, tiny, 20-something chick. So I'm not hurting her. I grab her and she starts pulling away. I'm like, that's fine. Another officer comes over and we're able to we didn't even put her in handcuffs. We just sat her down gently, like literally, I'm not mincing words. It's not like we dumped her on her face or anything. It was the most controlled, safe experience to just calm this person down and sit her on the ground. I didn't think anything of it. Nobody thought anything of it. No other officers on scene. My sergeant was literally the other guy that had her other arm. So my sergeant was the one that was there with me doing this act. And when I came back from our honeymoon, I went back to work, they wrote me up for that. And they used that write-up in conjunction with the other write-ups that they had, because all the write-ups that I got were always customer complaints, basically. Citizens complaining about Craig being mean.
Nice.
He's not nice.
Oh.
And what was really funny was the people that would complain on me were the people that were dealing drugs, because I only was concerned about dope. It was so prevalent and still is that's where I thought my service was best put to use. So people that would deal drugs at night would come into the police department and complain because Salazar was following them everywhere. Stop dealing drugs and I'll stop following your car. I'll stop looking for every reason to pull you over and stop you from breaking the law, right? So I had quite a few write-ups, but they were all that type of stuff. And they used this last write-up as the catalyst to put me on admin leave. And then they ran it past the city attorneys, who in the body cam footage, you can see at one point my foot crossed the threshold of the door. I didn't go into the hotel room, but my foot crossed the threshold into the hotel room as she was fighting and struggling and trying to pull away from us. And they used that as a Fourth Amendment violation of unlawful search and seizure. Because if you're at a hotel, it has the same
as your house, right?
Exactly, same rights as it would if you were at your house. So now they had a really firm justification for terminating me, right? I had just violated somebody's Fourth Amendment rights. Oh, now we have a liability issue. This officer's dangerous. We can't, because if he's out there violating people's rights, we're going to get sued as the city. So that was their justification to put me on admin leave. And then the admin leave process took about 2-3 months, which involved me going to like a psychological evaluation. And this time I decided to actually be truthful during my psychological evaluation instead of lie during all the other ones that I did to get hired. So I just showed up and was honest with the guy. And I thought it went really well. And the psychiatrist, but obviously it's the department's appointed psychiatrist. And so I failed that psych eval. Now they have a Fourth Amendment violation and I'm not fit for duty. So that's why I got fired, which just fucked my brain.
I'm sure.
Because you took my family away. As soon as I went on admin leave, everybody in the department stepped away from me. All those brothers that were like, on a Monday, not just got my back, like we're barbecuing, like we're family.
Going on family
vacations together.
Yeah.
We went camping as, all 5 of us together with all of our family. And as soon as admin leave happened, they step away from you.
Oh man.
And you're isolated because you're trouble. You're poison.
Yeah.
Right?
Or anathema. You're a problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can't get
Nobody
that
wants any
stink
of that.
on me
Yeah.
because we're so scared at losing our jobs as police officers. So then I go through 3 months of having to go to work on admin leave and sweep floors and file, backlog reports and basically busy work because technically they still have to pay me and they won't just let me go sit at home and send me a paycheck. So I have to come do this petty work. And I wouldn't quit. They wanted me to quit.
Of course.
Because then everything's easy. And I'm like, I'm not going to give you guys that satisfaction. So I drew it out all the way, which was really kind of foolish, but I was stubborn.
There's I don't know if you'll get to that, but also when you had I hope you can't pick up my stomach. It's like raw. It came to the moment of you had drawn it out and when decisions made, so maybe you're going to get there, but I'm just going to,
Go ahead, please.
I know if you're going to get there. I don't want to say this is your story.
I don't know where I'm going, baby.
You don't know where you're going. So he had to just keep showing up, and he just kept showing up, and he was still wanting to help, and was still I don't know how much I remember this process, and you were still showing up and wanting to be there, and be supportive for your family that was there, and also had this like belief that deep down, like they were going to support you and help you. And none of that happened, and you stayed. And when it came time with the decision, you're like, okay, this is where we're at. You can appeal it if you want. You can appeal it. You can now start going from like, and now fight for your job. And what did you do?
I didn't, right?
It was beautiful.
Yeah. So
You just let it go.
He chose himself, he surrendered.
yeah.
And all the ways that it was chaos, and you were like, I'm not fighting for this anymore. I'm fighting for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had other agencies. Like I could have gone and worked for Grantsville. I could have gone and worked for the county. The
They
county
approached
wanted me. Yeah.
Hey, does he want to come work for us? Like they wanted him on their team.
It was so easy for me to go get another job as a cop somewhere.
And I was like, oh God, please don't.
And when it finally came and said, and it was all done, I was like, I think I'm done being a cop.
Yeah.
And that was the
Beautiful.
end of like so many things, but also the beginning of so many things.
Mm-hmm.
That's when real shadow showed up,
Yes, it did.
and it showed up in force. That's when, so Stephanie and I got married, and that's when we started healing, truly healing. And the beauty of seeing all the love and all the connection and all the, like that first couple of years of our marriage gave us the strength to hold on during the last 7 years of what we've been through since we got married.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm not laughing because it's not true. I'm just like, wow.
That's exactly,
what happened.
Because the last 7 years has been true healing.
We've been healing.
Yeah. I just have to like commend you, because my ex-husband was in the military, and it's a very similar mentality. Like he served in the Iraqi war, which it was kind of crazy because I felt like I needed to support him, and it kind of justified his behavior, right? I'm like, well, he went and fought for our country, so like I can't, like I excused a lot of his behavior. And the thing that I'm seeing in you is that you didn't stand for that societal bullshit that like you're just supposed to take all of that and just keep saying that you're okay. Like that's the thing I think needs to change in our society, where police are concerned, where the military is concerned. That's so not okay to just expect human beings to be exposed to that and then say, no, I'm actually fine.
Yeah.
Nothing's wrong. Like my ex would not go get help because he was like, my file will be tainted for life. Like I will not be picked to go out and do certain things in the military. Like
It's exactly why you don't as a cop.
Yeah.
Because even though they tell you, you know, call this number if you
we
need help,
encourage you.
right? The
Yeah.
department
You're
posts it on the
supported.
wall in the hallway. If you need help, call this number. Nobody's fucking calling that number, because we know that it's going to get back to admin, and suddenly we're not fit for duty and we can't do our job.
And the men that did have like the breakdowns, right? Or
Right.
did end up having to go on psychological leave, they were tainted.
Exactly.
They were weak.
Yeah.
They can't handle this. They're not strong men.
Well, it's an impossible job. I mean, there's no,
No, it's a lose job.
yeah, it's an impossible job in an impossible system that there is. You just helped me have so much more compassion, and I have always considered myself somewhat of a compassionate person, especially towards law enforcement, because there was a time when I was younger that I thought that might be something I would like to do, and then I was on the other side of it as a convicted felon.
Mm-hmm.
And so, by the way, that's an interesting thing, right? Because I've heard so many times that convicts and cops are going down this same road, right? And as I'm hearing it, I'm seeing it more and more.
And
man,
I love connecting with you in the last few months that we've connected, Brad, because it's bringing me so much joy and happiness to see this like shared life experience that you and I have. I obviously don't judge you for anything when it comes to being a convicted felon or anything like
Right.
that. But at the same time, it's just funny, the paths, right? You go down that path and end up in those places, and I go down this path and end up in these places, but yet we have so many things that are synchronistic and line up and we can relate to, and it's just beautiful.
And then we end up in this same spot where we're doing this work.
Right.
Keep ending up in the same spots.
Yeah, keep ending up in these same spots. So
Completely different paths.
yeah, totally different paths, and that's beauty. That's power. That's this thing. I mean, you referenced it where we're at these same spots, even when we're not there physically. We're in these same spots. Our energies are flowing, and I felt the exact same thing. So the career ends, and Steph, what's happening with your career? Are you still at
I double
dispatch?
down. Yeah.
She doubles down.
I double down. I get promoted. I become immense to my work. I take on massive responsibilities to become
Because now she's the
very
sole breadwinner.
integral to the function of it. Like the role that I had was, I doubled down.
When I got fired, I decided I wasn't going to go get another job. We were doing spiritual work. I was doing like spiritual readings and going to spiritual fairs and doing all this energy stuff. And I decided that's the path I was going to take. There's not a lot of money in that.
Right.
And I had so many other shadows that were in the way of actual legitimate work. Even though I did some good work, we've done some good work over the years, but so basically I didn't get a job. I was just hanging out, suffering, drinking, being miserable, and pretending that I was some enlightened person. And so, yeah, you had to double down.
I've done that thing too.
Worked those crazy hours, and then I had to bring my work home
Yeah.
because there was so much being like
Because you got
on
into
the
leadership.
floor
Is that what happened?
and
she got
admin.
promoted.
So I had to
Management.
be on the floor and do that as well as all the other duties. So I was always working, always had stuff with me. I was always there. I always had my phone going off. There was always, like, I just had to be all like
if
what I thought.
if you're going to succeed in law enforcement, it becomes everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
And it did. It did. Until I broke. Until I broke.
How did that happen?
A mental breakdown on the shower floor, like all the work that we were doing and all the pain that we were inflicting on each other, and just like our shadows dancing away, leading the way, until I just, like, I had a mental breakdown in a sense, and like had to keep trying to figure out how to go through it. And I excelled at my job while I was spiraling until.
She was the best dispatcher.
Thank you.
Period. And I'm not just saying that as her husband. Other officers said that. She was the best dispatcher, period. The time period that she worked there, she raised the level. And if Steph was working, man, you were covered. It didn't matter. I mean, I could get on the radio and request 46 different things, and 5 seconds later, she'd have 46 different answers. Wow. On top, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's hard to be a cop, but I'm dealing with what's in front of me. She's dealing with what's in front of me, what's in front of that officer, what's in front of that officer, this officer from another agency, the 15 calls that are on hold, the 911 where she's delivering a baby. She's calling the helicopter to get it coming. She's doing all of this, and she's also training the person that's sitting next to them, trying to figure out how to type some fucking, answer to a question. Like, the level of multitasking, it is the epitome of like if feminine energy is the ability to multitask, that's what she embodied as a dispatcher. And she was the best at it.
That's awesome.
Nobody knows what dispatchers do.
Yeah, I was just like, wow, I've never thought of that. Like, I honestly thought you just answered the 911 calls.
So when I key up and I say Twila 1060, go ahead.
That's
Local,
in 1 year.
Yeah, Utah, blah, 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 location. So she's entering all that information and running that license plate, as well as like making sure that that car isn't stolen, or if the owner of that vehicle doesn't have warrants. She's doing all of that while she's on the 911 call. And then when she gets to a point where she can pause what she's doing for me, she answers another call that's like, hey, there's somebody at the park that just kicked over the trash can. Do you think you could have an officer? Yes, of course we'll have an officer come respond immediately. And then she switched back to the 911 call. It's okay. The officers are almost there. Just keep doing compressions. Just keep them breathing. Just, guiding people through CPR. Literally, she was, got commendations for helping babies being delivered on I-80. Like, the level of what she did, I can't even imagine. I thought I was multitasking.
I just felt my anxiety level rise.
Right?
Hearing that. Holy cow.
And you also have to maintain this sense of calm and presence with
you
all of
have
that.
to be that soothing voice. You can't be like, holy shit, did they just get shot? Are you serious? Oh my God. She has to be calm and assertive and handling everything for everybody.
No matter what.
And almost no dispatcher could do it. Stephanie
There
was
was
one.
good ones
There
there.
were a couple
There
that
were
were
good
good,
ones.
but Steph was the best.
Thank you.
So go ahead.
So
Sorry.
I
Not sorry. You're
yeah,
amazing.
thank you. I burned myself out too, and there was just like it was such the work environment there, because you have the calls and the chaos and everything, and that should be enough. But the way that the agency is ran and how toxic the environment was, the work environment was harder than the calls. I didn't process the calls until years later, before I started to like really have to deal with the effects of the calls. And like here now I still get triggered by things. I knew I had certain triggers from things that would happen to kids, and some of those really hard like calls, but it was like that surface. I didn't know. Once I got out of the toxic work environment, because everybody's damaged, nobody's getting help, so you have like hurt people hurting people and controlling, and it's just this horrible environment.
Small town politics, all that kind of stuff at play.
It was terrible.
That's all about.
Terrible. And then everything that was going on at home, which was chaos and spiraling, and then I've got
Blended
all
family.
Yeah, the blended
these
family.
things.
2015, we blend these kids together, right?
So there came a moment where I was in the shower and I just crumbled and I was on the floor and I just broke. Like there's many moments, but this was different because then I stood up and decided that I was changing. I was quitting my job. I was going to massage school. I was going to lead this life now. And by the way, I was with the Soul Income, but I wasn't. You were
doing Dream Pod stuff
you
at that
had
point?
started with Dream Pod stuff.
Just barely,
and it
yeah.
was like this, but it wasn't a like,
Well, that was 2017.
yeah. So it was like a year.
I started it in Dream Pod in fall of 2016.
Was it 2016?
So just barely. It wasn't
And-
nothing.
Yeah. And this isn't a every 2 week paycheck. It's I don't even know if you want to describe
it's
how
not a big deal.
So I took away I felt like our security, our steady paycheck, our insurance, our income, let all that go and said,
Took the leap.
and I'm going to go into debt. I'm going to take out because now I'm going to cost us money. So instead of bringing money, I'm going to cost us money, and just had to trust. And it was like this shift. I knew that it was going to happen. I knew where I was going to school. I looked at a couple of them. I had to apply to get into the school, but I quit my job the next day. I put in my 2 weeks, and my lieutenant was like, "What do you want? We will give it to you, Day. Like you can't leave."
Everything came out of
They
the
were
woodwork
like,
to keep
"We
staff
will
there.
create position for you. You
Raises,
get the hours you choose,
everything.
everything." And I was like, and it was close. Like I had that like, ooh, it was like the decision's made.
Yeah.
And
Power of a decision.
The decision
Courage.
made.
Yeah.
To hear, we lived through it, but I don't know how we lived through it. And the level of that idea too, that you're taking away our money, and obviously you didn't take away our money, right? But the decision to, what are we going to do for money? That's a
We'll
great
figure it out.
question. What about health insurance? That's another great question. What about our relationship? Even better, that's a great question. What about the kids? We actually don't have any idea what we're going to do about that.
We're just gonna figure it out.
All of those things, you did that really hard thing.
You had to trust.
I feel like, yes, it's this trust to the point where you're willing to take that leap of faith. And it's the leap of faith that's where the beauty happens and real transformation happens. And you're letting the universe know, I don't know what it looks like, but I'm just going to trust you, and I'm jumping. So you're there to catch me, right?
Holy
Those
cow.
are transformations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And the
I did it.
podcast was birthed in 2016. So that kind of, as all of this was going on, that's what the podcast, and the reason the podcast is Energy is Love is because that's the belief. This whole thing, like you were talking earlier, Brad, we don't know how electricity works, but we just kind of, the energy that our belief in the way that we feel, in the way that we kind of live our life, that unknown thing that connects all and that flows through everything and that everything is made of and vibrates with, and the universe is basically birthing forth all the time, is love. Because at the time I could feel connected to Stephanie and to my kids when I wasn't physically connected to them. And that just told me that, it's love. And I would get into meditation and I would just be overcome with love. And so I have a little boy inside of me that likes to make the big really, really small so he can understand it. So I just simplified it. Energy is love. It's really simple for me. And that became the thing that we just used as kind of like the North Node.
The North Node,
Right.
yeah. Right. We went from guessing and just trusting and surrendering and clusterfucking our way through everything to now it's intentional. Like, we're still working with shadow. We're still figuring things out. And there's always, like, as soon as you get that, okay, then it's like, you get to look at this, like all the layer, all the different ways that it comes up. And now we have a way we can see how we got through and how we succeeded. And now we know how to implement things and guide. And just like, okay, now we did it all wrong. We somehow managed to get it right. Now we have the blueprint. And so now we have like a roadmap to how we keep going and how we know everything is a double down, but it's on us and it's on our journey and it's on our love and it's on transforming our lives and lives of others. And so now we have this.
Yeah, in 2021, so last year, because obviously 2020 did what it did for everybody, right? We got married in 2015, and then all shadows came out. They all came out to dance and play for the next 5 years. And in 2020, I think we kind of withdrew within our cave and kind of really got super... all of our kind of semi-healthy, not really healthy coping mechanisms that were safe enough. Like, we drank a lot during 2020. There's a lot of podcasts. You go back and listen to 2020 where we're just drunk and having fun. And we did a lot of surviving during that time period.
That interesting, alcohol became a thing. Like, in 2020, I started drinking more than I think I'd ever drank.
I drank a ton when I got fired. And then again during 2020, we used to sit down and record our episodes with a pack of White Claw. And, it was pretty much done by the time the episode was done.
Yeah.
And so we kind of were just hanging on by a limb because we had done so much healing and so much shit had come out, and we were still kind of feeling the effects of all the trauma that we had, all the shadow stuff that had come out since we got married. We were still kind of sore and recovering, but not really recovering. We were wounded, like really, really wounded.
In our cave, licking our wounds.
Exactly. And then I think for me personally, I got to a point where something had to change. It was another moment where it was like, I'm not going to go forward like this anymore. And so in 2021, I kind of, not in a healthy, good way, but in a best way that I could at the time, told Steph that she needed to go to therapy. Like, something had to change. And it's really easy for me to always just project everything, right?
Yeah. You need therapy.
Right? I'm the one that's balanced.
I'm okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
but I did.
And luckily she did. And I followed suit right after. She started in February. I started in April. And we did massive therapy work last year to bring us to 2022 where we're like, oh, this is it. Now we are 100% all in to the life's work that we are creating now and moving into.
We had spent so much time in like retreats and like growth and trainings.
Yeah, healing, trying to heal.
Like all of these different ways before it just came like down to a head and said, we need this intense, deep, one-on-one right here therapy. Mm-hmm. So luckily we had all of these skills that we got to come in with too. Because I don't know if I was strong enough before all of these skills. Because the therapy we did we're super intense, deep therapy. It is.
Yeah, we did MDMA, MDMA assisted therapy.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. So we both found.
I'm not very familiar with that.
Do you want to be? Like, do you want us to go into it?
Is it time or is it another podcast?
How much time are we at?
It might be another podcast.
We're at 2 hours. I am curious. Give me a brief synopsis, if you can, of what MDMA.
So MDMA.
I mean, I'm familiar with MDMA.
Okay, so you're familiar with MDMA, right? There's an organization called MAPS.
Oh,
that was founded back in the early 80s.
Very familiar with MAPS.
Familiar with MAPS and Rick Doblin.
Yeah.
He was on the podcast. I got an opportunity to interview Rick.
How cool.
Back in 2017. But they have championed MDMA-assisted therapy since the
MAPS
90s.
stands for multidimensional or
Association of, I don't remember it either, but
psychedelic
science or
research or something. So it's basically psychedelic research.
Yeah, it's a nonprofit organization whose sole purpose is to legitimize as well as get to the point where it is an actual FDA-approved way of treating
removing
PTSD.
The schedule.
Exactly. So you have to take it off of the Schedule 1 classification on the federal level. And so they've done that work for the past 40 years.
Right.
And they're now in the final phases, and they suspect that it's going to be approved, I think, by 2024. So then it's going to actually be implemented across the board. But part of the clinical trials, because it's at a point where it's been approved to have clinical trials.
On humans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's the type of therapy that we dove into, and we found people here in Utah. And it changed everything.
Everything.
It really changed everything. So you take a dose, and it's under a clinical setting with therapists. Ideally, you have 2 therapists to basically sit with you during this experience. And the easiest way to explain it is you basically do shadow work softly and comfortably and with support, because you're walking through shadow.
Yeah.
You go there.
It's legitimately like in the deepest, it's the hardest work that I've ever done, but you're doing it with the assistance of the therapist as well as the MDMA, and the MDMA just makes everything softer, so it's okay and it feels a little bit safer, so you can look at the things that you've never. It's not even the things.
Walls down so you can see.
It's not even the things that you subconsciously were hiding or you didn't want to look at. It's the things that you couldn't even see.
Yeah.
It's the shadow that hid behind the shadows.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you show up to it and you are supported and you have it, it's not to say it can't be done outside of that type of therapy, but that's what we've done, and it saved us.
Well,
fast tracks things. I
for
feel
sure.
like.
I was just. I feel like I'm quoting Matt and Ash all the time lately.
It's our whole life now, dude.
Right.
We have so much to talk to you guys about.
Yeah. Like reading the inner work this morning or yesterday. I can't remember when it was. But they talk about the fact that all these tools that we have, yoga, meditation, plant medicine, they all show us what we're possible, or what's possible, what we're capable of. And that's what MDMA, that's what psychedelic sciences show. Just like any therapy, any therapeutic, it shows you a way that your body can heal, right? When we're dealing with physical therapies. And so emotional, spiritual therapies show you what you're emotionally capable of, what your spirit can do. And that's, so it opens up the realms of possibilities. Exactly. You're like, oh, now I don't, it's not that I don't need it. If I need it, I need it. And it can remind me of what's possible. And shifting from using these things, which they can all be used as coping mechanisms, right? Or they can be used as opening up our
one of my favorite things that we heard Matt say was, one person's medicine is another person's poison.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, for us, that's what MDMA was. It was definitely the medicine that we needed. Mm-hmm. And we also, last year and during 2021, as well as during going through all that therapy, we were microdosing psilocybin. So we were also kind of using that to heal as well, and all the benefits that has. And
well documented. And
exactly.
So excited for that to be.
Same thing, right? It's being legitimized, it's being decriminalized. It's now coming out and realizing that the stuff that they were experiencing back in the 60s and that revolution that took place.
Timothy Leary.
Timothy Leary, Ram Dass, all these people, right? who did all that work. Rick Doblin was right in that phase as well, and he was like during the 70s. So he was on the heels of all of those guys that had that, and he was going to college during that time period as well. And so now we're bearing the fruit of all of that work here in the 2020s.
Those that came before us paved the way.
They cleared the way for us to heal today, right? And what I think is really beautiful is because I separate from that linear concept as well as like me and you and me all the same, right? Yeah. It's just us. Yeah. We're back there experimenting with LSD and all sorts of different stuff because at one point we recognize there's some dude in the future that needs that help. And, it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. Plant medicine, I think it's so powerful. I don't even remember where I heard it, but I heard that that's plants' way of communicating with us, communicating spirit with us, is consuming it in that way. And it can be so powerful.
It's such a beautiful thing.
So much wisdom.
So now what are you guys doing? So the day-to-day now, what does it look like, Steph and Craig? Because you're doing the podcast twice a week, and it's brought to us as I listen to it by Steph and Craig. I love that, by the way. And you make an offering on your podcast, so about coaching and
so part of, because over the last few years we've always done we've had this beautiful journey of spiritual work together that's been clouded with shadow and had a tumultuous journey to get to where we're at today. But over the course of that time period, we've both worked with clients individually. Steph had her massage practice, and she started to branch into more coaching with people, the clients that would come in, and started incorporating a lot more of her energy work into that space. I was starting to try to, coach men. I led a men's group in Salt Lake City for 4 years, where it was a weekly group, and it was showing up and sitting down with men and doing a lot of deep work with men. And so I was really thinking that I was going into that space of men's coaching and working with men. And now it's all just coming together. The podcast is our platform to share the love that we have with the world. And then we are coaching people, couples, individuals, working together. We're going to start building the foundation of everything else that we're going to be sharing, the workshops that we have in mind, the retreats that we have in mind, all that stuff that we have been brainstorming and dreaming about. 2022 is when it actually comes online and starts actually being implemented.
I love it.
And so, the yoga couple, Matt and Ash, were godsend. You guys you offered us that gift, and it has bared fruit that we could not even imagine, and it's changed our life. Beautiful. And it's going to give us the structure to build what we are going to offer and what we're going to be building and using and helping people, right? In service of love. Really, it's just how do we help everybody else find the love that's inside of them, and then come to this beautiful place of love that exists everywhere. As soon as you start to see it and open up to it.
Taking your hands and walking you through the shadows. It's not all love and light. It's not just about how you can rise. So like we'll meditate into out-of-body experiences to have fun, but then you got to go deep. We're sitting in it with you. We're taking you through it. We are.
Yeah. I love that. I feel like our paths align so well there. And I feel like our journey is just beginning with you guys.
I think so too. So grateful we are with you.
This has been beautiful. I can't wait to do this again and dive in more and more, because I think we'll have to do this often. But the one thing I'll say is this whole idea of love leading the way is something that we need more of. And so when we find each other and we share it, I find more courage. I find more courage to go and share that, and to share more of myself, rather than showing up, whether it's in at the gym or at work, showing up as the Brad that is kind of a hard ass and isn't afraid of anybody. That guy showing up with a completely different energy, and showing up, and so somebody else sees it and they can feel it. and they can show up as just a little better version of themselves.
I've been trying to smile when I drive everywhere. So every time I pass somebody, I try to smile. Even if I get a chance, I'll look at them, right, if it's safe. But if not, I'm just smiling so that they see somebody driving smiling instead of the way that we always see people driving, right?
Yeah.
Stressed and distracted and whatever. I'm just trying to smile at people and wave.
And smiling at people too. I've been trying to be more aware of like just being like in the store or public places and looking at. I feel like 2020 did something with the masks where we don't make as much eye contact as we used to, or smile at people as much as we used to. So I've been trying to.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I just applaud you guys, because that going through that journey and coming out through. Well, and not, I mean, just continuing to rededicate yourself every day, because I see it. And it's like you said, Steph, it's not all sunshine and light and happiness. There's hard shit that you're going to have to dive into. And as we do that, we can take another step up. We can raise we can ascend just a little more. There is no destination for me. There is no final point where I get to say, done. And I feel that with you guys, and I'm grateful to be going on this journey with you guys. It's a beautiful thing.
Likewise.
Yes.
Make sure anything you guys would like to say as we're wrapping up, because we're just against time.
Yeah, thank you guys
Thank
for
you
everything.
so much.
Go to, our podcast is everywhere. It's easy to find. Go subscribe to us on YouTube and Instagram and all the jazz. But it's like,
And I can't endorse you more because that feeling comes through, and it gives one more person an opportunity to be just a little more courageous and take one more step. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast was brought to you by True Agency Real Estate. If you want to check us out, our website is www.utahtrueagency.com, and we are also on all of the socials.